Live and direct from the beautiful Bay Area is Rich Lieberman on this gorgeous, fantastic, in terms of the weather at least, Friday in the Pacific time zone. We talk about media here, at least when your rather ubiquitous host is not busy spending nearly 4 months in the hospital recuperating from spinal stenosis and all sorts of malfunctions. Anyway, trying to make a full recovery, not going to happen anytime soon, but I'm back to at least where I could do shows, where I can give you some modicum of entertainment, perhaps inform you, perhaps give you some information, offer some critique, offer some critical analysis, and so forth, and all the while being somewhat plausible and entertaining and shifting my eyes and allow you to see my latest stubble and how one observer said I look cool with this. So, look, I'm a clean, and I'll get to the KNBR and the KCBS and the state of San Francisco radio in a moment. But you can't go strictly radio and television news and all that, and just after you've been gone for 4 months, and where the internet has you dead, hit by a bus, the victim of aliens, that kind of a thing. You have to slowly emerge from the abyss and offer critical analysis, of course, other things, of course, that kind of stuff. So bear with me. We're going to make a gradual return to one of the reasons why you come here, and that is Rich adjusting his glasses. No, that is the media, and we're going to talk about lots of things. We're going to talk about radio. We'll talk about television, internet. Oh my God, you can't forget about streaming and all that. We'll talk about that. I'm going to broaden this entire, shall we say, endeavor and make it a lot more philosophical, a lot more comprehensive, and try to give you a full compendium of things to talk about, all things being media. So, yeah, by the way, you like the new look? And a leaner, I mentioned on Thursday that I'd lost 50 pounds. Well, and I said I was kind of like at 260 at one point. This was, several years ago. And now I'm about 175, 174 ish was the last official weight. And, do I feel lighter? Somewhat. But with this, spine thing, and I can move around. I lift my arms. I do this. I'm doing disco, symbolic disco, not actual disco. But in reality, this is a slow process. Not by my choice, but I'm doing my best, right? And speaking in weird syntax and just overall acting completely dorky. But again, not my doing. I'm reacting to the consequences, reacting to the circumstances, better word, that have been dealt my way. You don't always get a great hand in life. I'm not a blackjack player. I'm not a poker player. I could play both, but these hands were not especially, shall we say, advantageous for me. So I'm having to adjust. So bear with me. Okay. While I was gone, recuperating, reinvigorating myself, trying to get back to a somewhat, cohesiveness is not part of my virtues so far. I got to do a lot of watching. I mentioned I watch CNN, listen to the radio, which is, one of the few things that people are doing these days. Not a lot, because radio apparently is dying, has been dying, and that kind of a thing. But back to what I was talking about. And And I'm Rich Lieberman, and you're not. Okay. Stealing the Chevy Chase documentary line. And by the way, I watched Chevy Chase from his original days at Saturday Night Live back, what, 51 years ago or almost 51 years ago? Okay. We'll talk about that too. 'Cause I got to watch I'm Chevy Chase and you're not, because I'm getting this kind of, full fledged respect in terms of viewing and listening and all that. But don't bury the lead. For God's sakes, get to what you're going to talk about in this particular situation. And that is the radio on San Francisco airwaves these days. And I got to do a lot of listening, not by choice, mind you, but by circumstances. And look, KNBR continues to decline and get worse. And in the words of Keith Olbermann, worser, the worst person in the world, and the worser and worserness and all that. Well, we have the worst radio station in the world. Look, when you have limited resources, you can say a lot of shit and profess to be, money limited and all that, and make excuses, which KNBR does. When you have no program director, when you have to hire literally offspring from not necessarily more established media stars, they're not even stars, they're not even celebrities, they're nothings. And you have to do shows based on the fact that your offspring will work cheaper than your more established people, like sports writers in this instance, then you get what you pay for. Or in this case, KNBR, is part of the cumulus media elimination chain, in which case they put shit on the air and they get justifiably shitty ratings. And KNBR is probably at its worst. And I marvel at not mediocrity, because if they were just merely mediocre, it'd be one thing, but they're beyond mediocre. They've got a horrific morning show. Yeah, some kind of a show. A clown show would be more entertaining and be more successful. A midday show, which is slightly better, but that's not saying much. Greg Papa's honeymoon is over. And Papa doesn't talk about his affliction that much anymore, other than to say that he's on the mend. And again, in that area, we wish him nothing but the best. Nobody desires anybody to have a terminal illness and suffer through all of that. So on that end, hope Greg Papa, and many of you, of course, all of you hope, I would think, that Greg Papa gets better. But the show from 10 to 2 is abysmal, is ridiculous, and it's just not very good. And the MC, the ringleader, a guy by the name of Greg, not Papa, Greg Silver, who is offspring of an alleged sports writer named Mike Silver. It's like, oh my God, carnival act, amateur hour, a guy who is, all of the 20, whatever he is, 25, 26, doesn't add any kind of depth, doesn't offer any kind of shall we say, differing opinion, allows Greg Papa to drone on and to talk on and on, doesn't offer a rebuttal, doesn't take part in any kind of, co mingling in terms of conversation. It's basically a guy like the youngster deferring to the more older established voice who doesn't have much to say anymore and is instead relying upon a sponsor, which happens to be a whiskey, to provide programming. KNBR's ratings are in the toilet, but really in the toilet. They're now below like the San Francisco Unified School District in terms of ratings. And I haven't even mentioned the 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. show, because that's got to be the worst show. It makes the morning show appear to be as if it was the Fledermaus, which is a renowned opera score. Excuse me as I choke. In any event, the ratings are terrible. The shows are awful. Speaking of 2 to 6 in the afternoon, more offspring shows, as I call them. You have the son of Greg Papa, Derek Papa, or excuse me, D Pop, with his co-host, prima donna Adam Kopikopes, who thinks she's funny, who giggles endlessly, and has an absolutely disgusting, awful giggle, which I think he believes is part of his shtick, and that people are catching on and will eventually laugh one of these centuries at his cackle. And it's a cackle. It's horrible. And what has happened, folks, and you all know this. I mean, I hate to beat a dead horse, but in this case, the dead horse is not only abysmal, is not only bad radio. It's so bad, it's not even worthy of being entertainingly bad radio. It's just god awful. And the ratings prove it. The rejection by San Francisco listeners of this horridness. KNBR is a joke. They once had the 49ers in terms of having alternative programming that you would think lift them and give them a bounce. But that's not the case, because the 49ers, although they had a good season, they didn't have the kind of season that most NFL teams rely upon to say we had a success. We were either in a playoff mode, we won a playoff game, and then we advanced to more playoffs, maybe even a Super Bowl. 49ers have lost multiple Super Bowls lately. They have not given any kind of bounce to KNBR, which ultimately means KNBR has had to rely upon its putrid programming, in which case you have a terrible morning show with morning whore Brian Murphy and his alleged water boy. And that's a nickname foisted upon the few listeners by Mr. Murphy, who refers to his sidekick as a water boy, because apparently water boy doesn't know how to act anything other than his robotic self and ask inane, stupid questions, and whose only bit of verbal contribution is to say, to your point, Mr. Waterboy, Marcus, Dorcas. That's what he says every 5 minutes. To your point, Murph. To your point, Murph. As if kissing Murph's ass, which he is, figuratively speaking, doing so. Bad ratings from 6 to 10. Bad ratings from 10 to 2 with the aforementioned Greg Papa and one of the offspring kids, and that is Greg Silver, the son of alleged sports writer Mike Silver. Thus, you have offspring shows. Greg Silver is putrid. I'll go into more detail on that later. Then from 2 to 6, you have more offspring shows. Adam Copeland, the son, speaking of offspring, of former Cumulus KGO talk show host Brian Copeland, who likes to giggle every 2 minutes, a sarcastic little twit. It's about this tall, this much tall. Okay, little side personal insult, you betcha. Show's not entertaining. And then you have more offspring. Derek Papa, the offspring of Greg Papa. They used to have a compelling story. And now it's just bluster and more bluster. And then you have his son. Geez, I wonder how he got the job. Derek Papa. Bad ratings from 2 to 6. Derek Papa and aforementioned Kaka Adam Copeland. A nothing show, sarcasm, and a multitude of gimmicks. They call themselves dirty work. The only thing dirty about this show are the ratings. They are dirty. Wait a minute. That would indicate they have ratings. They have no ratings. Now that's dirty, dirty work. My God, how pretentious beyond that. So KNBR, part of the Cumulus Let's Kill Local Radio in San Francisco, part of that company. See, Cumulus, as I mentioned years ago, and I will continue to mention, they are not a broadcasting company. They are owned by a hedge fund. And that would indicate business, but they don't know how to conduct business, does Cumulus. Because if they knew business, they certainly would be in another business, because they don't know how to run radio, which is why mostly all of their radio shows and radio stations are in the proverbial toilet. Folks, that's not just an opinion, that's fact. Radio stations are supposed to have a sliver of ratings, not Cumulus, and not in San Francisco. Now, look, radio in and of itself is a dying entity. We all know that. We've talked about it. We've read about it. We look at it and see what is taking place. The decline and fall of radio, which I've spoken about. You can react to it. You could try to get better. You could try to be more creative. You could try to learn from within and try to, reinvent the craft. I've always said, if you have something that's on the decline, but you make inroads, you create dividends, you try to hire and offer more creativity and thus entertainment, then no matter what industry you're purporting to try to recreate, people will watch. People, in this case, will listen. But you can't put up chicken shit. Nobody will listen to chicken shit. Chicken shit will go to the shitter. I'm using an obscenity to make my point, but there's more. People reject bad things, just as if they're rejecting the radio that is offered them in San Francisco. And virtually all of San Francisco radio is run, allegedly, by Cumulus, a company that has no idea what the hell it's doing and has limited successful radio assets because they simply don't know how to run a successful entity. And thus you have a KNBR, which is abysmal, and a KSFO, which is reinvented, and it is now drivel. They killed off KGO, which I predicted they would do about 15 years ago when they acquired it. And I said, give it time. But that Cumulus would ultimately murder, accomplished, kill, another word, but accomplished, SF radio, like KGO, which they did. They obliterated it. They made it obsolete. They cheapened it. And thus we have the official decline and fall of KGO. Okay. And that's what you have here. And you have KNBR, part of their other entities. And now their ratings are in the toilet, officially in the toilet. So I don't know, I guess they signed a extension of their deal with the Giants. And look, baseball is kind of semi-dead anyway. And they're about to have a big, big strike probably in about a year and a half. But I listened to KNBR while I was in the hospital, other hospitals, just by habit and just by the fact that, what, you want me to go FM and talk about KQED? Not for now. Maybe later. Wink, wink. We will talk about it later on. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but in due time. So I listened to KNBR. My God, again, it's so bad, it's not even worthy of listening to bad radio. They're so bad. Um, Rejection of cheap, uninspiring, high school level hosts who don't know crap, who are basically radio charlatans, and so on and so on. Um, so we have that end. And boy, is it an ending. Then you have KCBS. Now, I've lampooned KCBS pretty damn good, talked about how they have ruined one of San Francisco legacy radio stations like a KCBS when it was run well, when it was put together well by CBS, which used to have radio as an entity, no longer. I guess they saw the handwriting on the wall. But the radio in this city is, my God, how putrid it is. So KCBS, part of the part of the Odyssey chain. I guess they found a few bucks, and they were able to send, money into spending mode and get some radio people finally, as opposed to the Neanderthals they hired before, and sort of do creative radio, but that's not the case. And their ratings have gone nosedive also, though they were at a number one position. It's kind of hard to screw it up when you're the top dog. But again, keep in mind, this is San Francisco radio. Cumulus is the chief buyer for these companies. And anyway, the rest is history. So I'm going to talk about KCBS because I spent a majority of the time talking about KNBR. I'm going to talk about KCBS, and I'm going to take a break. So do keep it on this channel, become a subscriber, and I'll see you back within a couple of hours to talk about KCBS. Okay? Don't go anywhere. Go get some lunch, but eat your sandwich here. We'll be back soon enough. Okay? Thanks for watching.